Hello my friends and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. My name is Rich and on Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about the bands and the albums that are the greatest to me, based on listening to thousands of CDs and attending hundreds of gigs over the years. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe, press the red button and subscribe so that you can see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. Today I focus on the band named The Doors. Now, The Doors are quite an old band, to say the least. One of the very first rock bands, so to speak, and a band that not many people who are into hard rock and heavy metal know much about. However, they are without a doubt a true pioneer of rock music in so many ways. And one could argue that after maybe Elvis Presley and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the frontman for The Doors, a guy by the name of Jim Morrison, was probably the first full-on true rock star. But of course these things are always debatable. So how did I get into The Doors? Well, I used to go and hang out with a couple of friends of mine, and one of them, he used to have an attic with the Scalextrics in it. So me and my friends would play on the Scalextrics for hours and hours, and we'd listen to rock music. The guy whose house it was, he was a little bit older than the rest of us, and he already had a rock music collection. And the album that we used to listen to over and over and again, amongst a few others, was this one, The Doors Absolutely Live. This was my introduction to The Doors. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So who are The Doors? Well, The Doors are four men. As I've already mentioned, Jim Morrison, who was the singer and lyricist, although he liked to refer to himself as a poet. You have the keyboard player and backing vocalist Ray Manzarek, guitarist Robbie Krieger, and drummer John Densmore. And one of the things that made The Doors so special was that, much like one of my previous episodes when I was talking about baby metal, now cool it, I am not trying to compare baby metal with The Doors, okay? I know that would upset some people, but what I mean by that is the comparison in terms of the mixture of various different musical styles. The Doors would introduce many different classical music styles with the classical guitar, jazz drumming and jazz playing. You've also got the organ of the keyboard player, and lots of different styles, musical styles would come in to make the Doors rock music sound. Their first album was released in 1967, the year I was born. And it was called The Doors, self-titled The Doors. And this for many is their classic album. It has some amazing tracks on here, the most famous of which is probably the most famous Doors song, called Light My Fire. Come on baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire. I'm sure many of you have heard that. It's got a brilliant keyboard section to it. Okay, if you don't know it, check it out for yourselves. And they had a very short career. As I said, first album 67, they were over by 1971. And during that time they produced 6 classic studio albums. Their follow-up was called Strange Days to the first one. Then we had Waiting for the Sun, The Soft Parade, Morrison Hotel, and the final full studio album LA Woman. There were another 3 studio albums, but I don't really count those as they were just kind of outtakes from studio sessions put together to just make albums after Jim Morrison had died, because only 4 years later, in 1971, Jim Morrison died. He was a raging alcoholic, and there's a bit of mystery surrounding his death, as there often was with these rock stars many years ago. Elvis, a classic example. And that was it. The Doors was over. Short and sweet. They have sold 100 million albums worldwide, making them one of the biggest selling bands of all time. Very successful band, but as I said at the beginning, often little known in the rock and metal community. So let's go back to Absolutely Live. But before we do that, let's have a look at rock t-shirts by the sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So, Absolutely Live. A selection of tracks from their 1967-1970 American tour. And as I said, this was my introduction to the band. The first track on the album is a track called Who Do You Love, which wasn't actually a Doors track. It was written by an old blues player, I think he is, a guy by the name of Bo Diddley. And Who Do You Love Now? Brilliant Doors version of it, much better than the original, I think. Also on this album, a superb medley of some of the best Doors tracks that included 5 to 1, Backdoor Man, wonder what that song's about, and Alabama Song. Well, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Really Jim Morrison's theme song. As I said before, an alcoholic, and he had his fair share of visits to whiskey bars in his time. Also, another iconic track on this album, which didn't appear on any of these studio albums. A track by the name of The Celebration of the Lizard. A nearly 20-minute long track that basically encompassed various lyrical pieces, poems that Morrison had created, and was put into, in effect, a long piece of jam music, but it works really well. In fact, long songs was something that the Doors were very famous for. They had another long song called When the Music's Over, but probably their most famous long song, which is about 10 minutes long, is called The End. And it became even more famous when it was featured in a film titled Apocalypse Now, which was about the Vietnam War. And you have this very haunting song with terrible war images going on in the background in the movie. Brilliant piece of movie making, that film. If you haven't seen it, I would check that out as well. And The End, well, the lyrics to The End caused a lot of controversy in their time, especially when Morrison cries out about him wanting to rape his mother. A track you really need to check out, The End. Now, gigs is a major part of my life, and unfortunately the Doors were over by 1971. But in 2003 I was lucky enough to see a new version of the Doors. This is the ticket from that show, and the new version of the Doors was titled The Doors of the 21st Century. And It featured the original keyboard player, backing vocalist Ray Manzarek, original guitarist Robbie Krieger. It didn't feature John Densmore because they had a bit of an argument, money related, I think, and they obviously needed a new vocalist, and that vocalist was a guy called Ian Astbury. And those of you who know your rock history will know that Ian Astbury was the lead singer of a band called The Cult, who were very popular in the 80s and early 90s. And he was a perfect choice for this reincarnation of the band. He sang like Morrison, he kind of looked like Morrison, and he had that charismatic, enigmatic persona to him that fit in. He wasn't a caricature of Morrison. He was still his own man, but he fit into the band perfectly. And the show I saw was awesome. A brilliant set list, a 2-hour show, a set list that included all the Doors songs you would want to hear. And it was just a fantastic experience to at least see half of the Doors live. And when I think about it today, nearly 20 years later, there's many bands out there now that only have 1 or 2 original members, and they are still worth going to see. And certainly the Doors of the 21st century, in the short period of time that they existed, were worth seeing. So there you have it, that is the Doors. I would always give you some recommendations to go and check them out further, and my recommendations would be certainly the first album. That is the place to start without any shadow of a doubt. If you do like live albums, then of course go with Absolutely Live as well. And another studio album I'd recommend would be their second one, which is Strange Days. I should also mention these CDs come from this box set, the Doors of Perception box set. And what's special about this box set is that all these CDs were remixed and put onto DVD, and they were remixed in surround sound, and they sound superb. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this episode, please click on the subscribe button so that you can see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. And until next time, remember, we rock!